Rob, thank you so much for joining How to Be Irish. Today we have Rob O'Donnell from Pallasgreen, County Limerick. Rob is a Gaeilgeoir, gay, and also responsible for getting the leaving certificate cancelled twice during the COVID days. Rob has spent a lot of time in politics, having worked for MEP Grace O'Sullivan for 2.5 years. He also ran in the general election for the Green Party, aged just 23, and received over 3,000 first preference votes. Passionate about climate change, civil rights, and refugee rights, Rob has spent his summers volunteering in Egypt and Palestine. And Rob's dog Yasser is actually from the West Bank. Rob, how did you come across Yasser, and how did you get him home to Ireland? I'm wondering about the logistics of all of that.
Yeah, it's thanks a million for having me. We go straight into the Yasser stuff. I was in summer 2022 in Bethlehem. The West Bank in Bethlehem is like, you could call it a commuter town to Jerusalem. It's like 10 kilometers from the city center of Jerusalem, but it's separated by a big, harsh wall that's only been there only for the last 20 years. But it's very much, Palestine and run by the Palestinian Authority, but, with the wall right beside it. I was volunteering there in a part of Bethlehem University. It's the Palestinian Institute of Biodiversity and Sustainability, and they have a natural history museum, which the existence of that is even a very political thing, that a Palestinian organization is saying, no, this is our natural history. This is what the animals who've lived in this landscape for thousands of years are like. This is the paleontology of it all. And we're taking ownership of that. And that museum is also quite new. So it was a very interesting thing for me to go volunteer at. It's kind of like woofing. You go live there for free, cook, do all of that, and do your hours. But we were over there, and I was mostly gardening and cooking for the other volunteers. We did some other cool projects with kids coming in learning about bits and pieces, all related to their schoolwork, and also on summer holidays. And there was a lot of wild dogs around the town. I think you kind of see them in lots of parts of the world where they just kind of live at distance and, scavenge and whatever. But it's actually an interesting thing. I've learned more because I'll come back to how we discovered them, but in the region, there's actually a dog called a Canaan dog, C-A-N, like the Canaanites. And these dogs are, they lived alongside humans, but they were never fully domesticated. So if you were a Bedouin, a shepherd, and you were bringing your sheep around, this is going back 2,000, 4,000, 5,000 years ago, you would have given water to these dogs, and they then provided some bit of protection. They kept away other wild creatures by just barking. So humans were giving them water, but the dogs fed themselves with other little wild creatures, but they never attacked sheep. So this is actually what Yasser is, I have realized, because I looked at the dogs and went, okay, that's his breed. And in the 2 years since I've had him, it really dawned on me to proper find it. It's also the national dog of Israel, and it's another political question. But sorry, going back to Yasser, he was a tiny little puppy. He was dying. There was a couple of us volunteers, and when you see a tiny little thing, it's hard not to help. And then, you walk him to the vet, and you start paying a bit of money to get him his medication. He was in an awful state. He couldn't walk or anything. And, even if it was a thing that we were helping him have a nicer few moments of his life, where that would have been a good thing. And then he rallied on, and you realize there isn't really a culture of dog ownership in Palestine. Definitely not that type of dog anyways. It's usually little small cute little like Maltese type dogs and things. So long story short, I found somebody to foster him, a very nice couple, and we got all of his vaccines and things in order, and I went back to get him about 6 months later. It didn't work out the first time, and I had to go back a second time. And this is where I didn't tell this story because I also wanted to protect some other people in this, but they're all out and fine now, and I can say this. He's registered as an Israeli dog because there's no way you can get a Palestinian dog with a Palestinian health certificate out through Tel Aviv. You can export them via Jordan. And this is the exact same thing actually for Palestinians who live in the West Bank. If you are from Bethlehem, you go to Jordan, and it's this totally humiliating experience of, you can see Tel Aviv, you see the planes coming in, Because actually this place is tiny as well. Like it's very, very, even when you're flying over, you're like, oh, there's Jerusalem behind me and there's Tel Aviv in front of me, and you're in the plane and you're landing in the airport because it's halfway in the middle. But for Palestinians, they go and they queue up at the very few checkpoints between the West Bank and Jordan, and it's manned by Israeli border guards, and they will, they might ask you to open up all your stuff. It'll take hours, so you have to give like a day's space if you have a very expensive flight from Jordan the next day. But Yasser, we treated him as an Israeli dog because we were in the position to do so. They don't really question the white Irishman that much. And when we got him out, there was a lot of questions in the airport. But all was fine, and I mean everything was above board. But an expensive experience going back and forth. But we got him back, and if anything, it's a good conversation starter with people. But because he looks kind of funny, and you bring up his story, and that's him now. He's nice and happy in Pallasgreen, County Limerick. The lady who looked after it, she said, that fostered him to for those months, she said that there was no room at the inn for Yasser in Bethlehem, so he had to go somewhere else. So yeah, it's a nice little story, very biblical.
Yeah, it is. And from Palestine to Pallasgreen,
we picked him well. I told myself for my 30th I'm going to get him a DNA test, and we're going to have a Yasser DNA party reveal. So that's how we'll do that. But yeah, he looks like a Canaan dog, or just a wild. He also looks like a dingo. So this kind of desert dog, they're bred for survival. So
yeah, I've seen him. He's got real big ears, probably for listening out for predators. Very good. So when you went back to get Yasser, you were in the West Bank again about 6 months ago. So obviously the war in Gaza was ongoing at the time. What was that like being there?
So yeah, I was actually I got Yasser before October 7th. So yeah, and so much has happened since then. A very sombering thing is, to be honest, it's okay. Like there's a full-on genocide happening in Gaza, and I've spoken to people whose parents experienced the Nakba in 70 years ago now, and that was a genocide in itself. It was a forced displacement of thousands of people, and they ended up in other places in Palestine, in Jordan, in Lebanon, and all over the world. And for some people, older Palestinians, it's the second one they're seeing in their lifetime. But unfortunately, a lot of that is happening now, and that is being more reported on because, of course, there's more focus on what's happening in Palestine and Israel at the moment. It's nothing new. Like we've seen a lot of reports of deaths in the West Bank now as opposed to Gaza, and increased violence there and settler violence. That was all happening. But when I was over the second time, when it didn't work out, there was just a random Israeli raid into the Palestinian city of Jenin, which is there's a very high Israeli military presence there all the time. It's also where Shireen Abu Akleh was killed, was murdered. When we were there, I think either 8 or 10 people were killed in broad daylight. The army came in and there was markets on, and yes, they had their targets within these people, and I don't know the details of that, but there was innocent bystanders just killed in that, and I think there was some reports on that. But even in that summer beforehand, when I was there, we were down in Hebron, which is the most segregated city, and it's really dystopian as well, what they have done, because there's nets above the shops, because there'll be a Palestinian shop owner at the bottom, and then there'll be an Israeli settler family up above who've just moved in and have taken a Palestinian family's house, and the tension is insane there, and you have to go through loads of different crossings to go across the city. There's also one of the most dystopian things we saw was a remote controlled machine gun with a camera on it, so like AI as well. So it's they're hands off on the violence, and it's also like the military exports from Israel are it's quite a lot, and they're exporting to various players in the global scene, but they are testing out these weapons in places like Hebron, and like the fact that they can put hands up and say, no, we're not going to take responsibility or put the responsibility on a 19 or 20-year-old Israeli soldier to take a life. It's now a bloody robot, or it's somebody else in a control room. Yeah, it's insane. Like, and in Hebron, actually, somebody, this was a year and a half before October 7th. We got caught up in scuffles, and all the crossings got closed, and we were running around through the kind of tunnels in the markets there, and we couldn't find our way out. We came across. This is a bit stupid of us as well. We were looking for something to do at 9 o'clock at night, but we turned the corner and suddenly there was some sort of a raid or a scuffle happening. And, 19-year-old Israeli soldier just guns on us. And we're like, oh shit, like what the hell? And, this is nothing. Like the guy quickly realized it was just 3 or 4 stupid tourists and 2 local Palestinian people. And they went back into their van and moved on. But the next day, the tensions were really high. Somebody was killed there. And some of my friends were still there because we went back to Bethlehem and we were sent videos of what happened in the lead up to that. And of course, it's just a young lad. I actually think he wasn't even an adult. I think he was maybe 16. And you could see, because everyone has a phone camera now, he passing away on the spot where we were just standing the night before. And that made no news anywhere. I think there was probably a Times of Israel English link or something that we got, and that was the only thing we managed to see. And unfortunately, it is just a thing of 70 plus years of this. Palestinian people are used to. Absolutely doesn't make it okay, but you would hope, number one, what's happening right now in Gaza just stops immediately, but that there is a kind of a longer term resolution here, because these things have come in waves again. Violence every couple of years, as in a big blowout event, and it's really bloody sad because I had a great time in Palestine. I also had some very interesting discussions and engagements with Israeli people as well. Like I went to Tel Aviv, and there was various encounters there. Also met some fabulous, amazing Israeli people who were anti-Zionist and were going to the protests every Friday in Jerusalem. And they're there and they're fighting a very tough battle because they're very much in the minority there. There was a former politician, I think he's from the left anyways, in the parliament there, and he's been kicked out since October 7th just because he said, what we would think is pretty common sense, human rights focused stuff, nothing actually dodgy on it. So, yeah, sorry, got a bit in depth in this now, but it really was crazy experience. And
what brought you there in the first place, Rob?
Yeah, you're bringing it very back to now the Irish question, because I think there is something. I mean, the history at one point it could have been the same. You go back 100 years ago, Balfour, as we were, declaring independence and all of that. Like there was a very, very similar input from the British into both countries, and then we've diverged since then. And of course, there was violence in Ireland, but I mean, things are definitely better now than how they are in Palestine. But yeah, you hear so many speakers in Ireland, and so many activists, artists, all speaking out about it. It's something that kind of just calls to you. And I said to myself, I'm quitting my job at X time and I'm going to go to Palestine, and then we'll move on to whatever the next challenge is. And then COVID happened, so it got pushed back. I was supposed to go out in 2020, but you couldn't fly, obviously. And I had some money saved up as well so that I could do like a good stint. But yeah, eventually we got out there in 2022. And it's also a time that just kind of maybe overlaps a little bit better with professional things. And I met a lot more Irish people. Actually, there's a lot of Irish people over there all the time. There's certain bars and cafes that the foreigners go to, as in people who want to speak English because they don't have Arabic. And yeah, you bump into Irish people all the time, and they're all on their own kind of interesting journey. And it is a thing that you bring back as well with you. And from the Palestinian side of things, they were always so particularly welcoming. I felt like, the king, I was volunteering with mostly British people, and like they were fabulous, amazing people as well. But it's got an extra warm welcome when you mentioned you were Irish to the locals, because they understand as well that we have
Yeah.
maybe a bit of collective experience, even if Rob from County Limerick didn't have direct experience with the Troubles and all of that. There's an understanding there innately, which I think is
Yeah.
something a little bit special about Ireland, if we're going into that now.
Palestinians and Irish both have been on the wrong end of the British. I suppose that thing where Irish are extremely charitable, and maybe that's why the Palestinians were so incredibly welcoming to you guys, maybe perhaps as opposed to the British. But what do you think it is about Irish people and their psyche? What do you think it is about us that makes us so charitable?
I won't do this as a whole pat in the back, aren't the Irish great? We're so nice. No, I'll just preface with that because it could be seen as a bit self-indulgent to Irish people chatting about how great we are. But no, it is an interesting question, though. To be honest, except for maybe like a very small part of society, we're only a developed country or rich country on the global scale in a generation, and I think there's still perspective that's passed down with that. I also would say as well, what's the most dramatic thing Ireland has experienced? It's the famine. My mother was in her 40s when she had me. Her father was in his 40s when he had her. So we're going back to 1909 to when my grandfather was born. And it goes back for two more generations where for some reason people were in their 40s. So we're only going to the great grandfather who lived through the famine. And I wish I had asked more pointed questions. I never met my grandfather; he was long dead. But I wish I had more pointed questions to my grandmother while she was alive about what stories did you have? Because it's, of course, stuff gets passed down, and obviously it gets watered down and lost and changed the more it's passed down. But that's super close. There are to make a comparison in Palestine, if you were having kids at a younger age at 20, that same amount of generations brings you back to the Nakba almost, if you're a young child nowadays. So it is something that it is there in the psyche of suffering and trauma and immigration. And I think also that immigration thing, because yes, a lot of people left, a lot of people leave and come back, but it does put you in the space of you're a minority somewhere else in the world. Suddenly it's cool to be Irish. We all know how people were treated up until the 80s even, and only across the water, in the UK. That gives perspective as well, and I hope we keep that. I don't like where certain narratives are going in the last few years, because at the end of the day, immigration is always a thing that happens. Let's focus on the real issues of public services and capacity in all of that, and not bloody scapegoat the non-white man or the immigrant coming in, because we know how this ends up. It doesn't actually fix anything, and we know how it ends up when it goes really bad. But it also, I think, just it's not very Irish. You don't get to be racist in Irish. That just really rings true. And on the charity side of things as well, it is. I'll maybe bring in the example of your Irish mammy. There is just this warmth and absolute oh my God, we have to do absolutely everything to help these poor people. And it comes from a different place, I think, as well. If we're going to go back, I was actually showing somebody reeling in the ears for the first time. A person who was born outside of Ireland and had never heard of this, they don't watch TV. And things I know Live Aid and stuff, that it had its issues, but there was this kind of stuff in telethon as it was all happening. It's a way of doing something, which I think for a certain Irish person as well, it is rewarding, because as you're looking at all the bad things happening in the world, it's pretty hard to
Mm,
figure how can
yeah.
I do one thing. And I think that's something, if you're reading the news, that's always hard to figure out. What can we all
Yeah.
do?
I think it was very much like intertwined with our education as well. So like the trochra boxes at Easter,
Yes,
and then
yeah, yeah,
Christmas
yeah.
time you'd have the shoe box appeal, and you'd be putting everything in the box and sending it
Yeah,
away. And it
yeah.
was
So
such like
one of the good things,
cool, like
the church has instilled is charity.
yeah.
More of that, please, I say, and less of the other stuff.
That's it. I suppose maybe we'll try to separate those things a little bit. But anyways, that's for another conversation.
Yeah.
Um you kind of like touched a little bit on like local life, local politics a little bit there, Robin. You're from Pallasgreen, which is in West Limerick, and I don't know if you're familiar with this phrase, but West Limerick being the place that time forgot. Um how do you feel? So I'm also from Limerick as well. I'm sure you're aware. Um, how do you feel about where places like Pallasgreen are heading? Like, and you know, coming at it from like I suppose your local politics hat. What do you wish for the future for these places, and what do they need, and where are they going?
Yeah, I'll correct you. We're in East Limerick, so we're actually very
Oh
cosmopolitan now,
Jesus!
so is it? No, I'm joking. It
I'm
is
so
East Limerick,
sorry.
yeah. So, like, I hug tip. Um, but I think it's the same as a lot of parts of rural Ireland. Like, of course, we'd like to see more stuff happening there because it is there can be there can be a lot done there. And we've decades of underinvestment, and people are literally begging for the most simple of things, like, oh, can we have the water, like, not be poisoning me, please. And we're being told, okay, by 2032 we'll have that new wastewater treatment plant. Jesus, like, this is just decades behind where we need to be. Sorry, your question, I got distracted by the East Limerick thing.
Yeah, I know. I had pictured it in my mind on the map, and I was picturing east, but my north, south, east, and west getting mixed up. But anyways, sorry, East Limerick, of course, hugging Tipperary. Yeah, I was just wondering. So, like, I suppose you as a young person living in rural Limerick, what is it like? What's missing? Where is it going? Like, what do you think is going to happen? Like,
Yeah, I think it was. I've definitely heard Saoirse McHugh. He was in the Greens and ran again there for MEP. And I think I've heard Holly Curran say it as well, that like this rural Ireland is conservative, yada yada yada. Like, I think it's a little shite. Like, yeah, of course it can be more conservative, but it depends who you're talking to there as well. I think as well now, um, probably property related as well, in the prices in the big cities. People are moving back, and they're either home or they're purchasing down the country, and they are not meat and two veg and spuds types like that. It's this caricature. Yeah, it doesn't ring true. And there's real diversity in our communities now, and like, I think we need to not just think that, oh, everyone's happy driving cars. Yes, people probably need a car if you don't live in like a village with that has a public transport node or a train station or whatever. Yes, you probably need the car, but like it would be nice to have options. And for me, that's a very clear thing. Like, I live in a rail line between Limerick and Limerick Junction, and there's no train stations on it. And I will talk for days about the train stations we need to open up in the country. But it's also, why don't we have these services? Why don't we have these nice things? It's because we just let our villages kind of empty out over the last few decades, because all the development was going into the suburbs. People were obviously moving away because it's maybe a bit more lively or fun to live in the city when you're a young person, and then you put down roots. We're kind of stopping that now. I'd like to think some of that is also property related, and people are going where they can. But the proper development of rural Ireland, if we're to include all the villages in that, that can make Ireland and East County Limerick a nicer place to live for the people living there and the new people who come in. Because it's not sustainable to run a bus service to a village of 50 people 7 times a day. But if you start developing that, then stuff does become more possible. And for me as well, I ran for the local elections there in 2024. I put in an effort, but I was also working on a bigger campaign, so that took up maybe a lot of my time. But I felt very inspired after it because you do see people with the same view of how things can be, and there's a bit of hope as opposed to the politics of complaining and giving out. Um, and I also got to discuss a lot of things that nobody else was talking about. I've now the job is I wasn't elected because you do need to put in a good bit more time, and you really need to embed yourself in your community, and there's a bit of learning in that too. But for the people who are elected, I'm absolutely going to push them to try to get these ideas in, because you'd be surprised, like the lack of vision. And I say that as someone in my 20s back living in rural Ireland. Like, there really is a lack of vision and hope by some elected reps of how things can be. It's very much just, we'll do the same thing through and through and through and go through the meetings, and they'll put in a little motion about fixing bits and pieces, and that's a part of the job as well. But I think we can have it so that as a young person, you can live anywhere in Ireland and it's going to be gorgeous. And that doesn't just mean you're in Dublin or Cork or Limerick City, that you can live out the countryside. And if I want to go for a pint in Limerick City with some mates, that I can take a 11:30 bus at home and it'll get me there. Or that we have a good, usable kind of rural taxi scheme so that I can do, can socialise. Or also that it's not all focused on the pub, and that we have other cool things happening that don't involve alcohol, because I think that's also a trap people get stuck in. There's nothing to really go to the pub.
Yeah, no, that's it. I think maybe people had that vision, but I think COVID's changed so much. Like you mentioned there about property and how that people are moving out to the big cities because they don't have to live there anymore. They have more of like maybe they do have to go into the office once a week, couple of times a week, maybe sometimes even once a month if they're lucky enough, or they're completely remote. They have that liberty to live in so many more places that we weren't able to live beforehand. Like, it's just opening up such a possibility to so many other places in Ireland. And at the end of the day, Ireland's a very small country. If we did have the good infrastructure in place, then we would be able to get between the cities absolutely no bother at all. Like, a high-speed rail between Cork and Dublin, for example. I know they've been talking about that for years, but how amazing would that be? Like, get up and down in an hour. Like, it's so totally possible.
Yeah, and you mentioned COVID. Like, I think, we're now changing how we're working, but I even think just people's minds about the way things are. Just let's rip it up and do things differently. Like, also, what's important? Is it the commute? Absolutely not. No, I think like the commute is dead. Let's make it better and faster for the people who have to do it. And let's increase all the capacity on our public transport for that. Like, Limerick Junction would be closest to me now, so it's only an hour and a half for me up to Dublin. I don't even notice it because you can work on it, and that works very, very nicely.
Yeah.
But I would love to see, as we get out, we're proper out of COVID now. There's actually a group of lads that I met at a festival, and it's this kind of informal rural gay lads. And like, to be fair, they're all very independent and they're doing their own thing. Like, they're owning their own businesses and stuff, because I think you have to be as well if you're still out in the country or you've moved back out. But there is these kind of I see it for a lot of them. It changed as well with COVID, and now they're doing their own thing and they're out the country, and it is just a nicer way of doing things. Like, if I'm going to have kids for sure, I want them to grow up in the countryside, get a bit of perspective.
Yeah.
Things. Then they can go out to the city for the college and the experience.
Yeah. Exactly. Get the best of both worlds then. And I think it's like, it's, I know, and originally, like maybe pre-COVID, it was like all these commuter towns in Ireland. It was like Naas, and then it was going out to Portlaoise. But like the idea of these other places that we can live in, really, it's really stretching out further and further. And, hopefully within time, it'll be able to drive more business into these smaller places. Like, that was something that stood out to me the most, was like how much you appreciated your local area during COVID, because you literally had like a 2-kilometer radius. You couldn't go outside it. So you had to find your oat flat white. You had to find your wood fire pizza on a Friday evening, and you had to find your nice bottle of wine. And so it gave space for these businesses to thrive and to set up. And I suppose that's where, kind of like your friends there, you mentioned that's probably where those kinds of businesses have come from. And then again, the other thing, like, does the pub have to be involved? Does drinking have to be involved? No, we've got run clubs, we've got sea swims, we've got, all these kind of more like, I suppose, healthier activities that we're seeing now. So, COVID obviously was absolutely awful, but I think there's some fantastic things that have come out of it, which hopefully will help Ireland in the long run from like an economic perspective, and from like a cultural perspective. Let's not lose that culture in those smaller towns, and let's reinvent and bring some new culture there as well. So I want to chat to you a little bit about climate change and environmental issues, Rob, if that's all right, because you worked for Grace O'Sullivan for 2.5 years, so you would have looked at it from the perspective of Ireland and the perspective of Europe and Ireland's place within Europe. How good is Ireland, or how bad is Ireland doing when it comes to climate change and environmental issues currently?
Well, we were laggards on climate action. Unfortunately, nothing really happened kind of, from the financial crisis onwards for about 10 years on climate action. But also on the world stage, things really paused. We had Paris agreement in 2015, where we said, yeah, we're gonna stop the warming at 1.5 degrees. We're at 1.5 now. And that's the really scary thing. I am really interested in the climate stuff, and it is why I joined the Greens. But there's various other parties that also care about this, and I hope that people do care as much as we do. Because what's the result here? Okay, I'm it's not good for ecosystems collapse and the damage we're doing to the planet. But my main interest in this is the people side of things. Who's going to suffer? It's poor people. In a developed economy like Ireland, it is going to be poor people here that might miss out, or their houses aren't insured or whatever, and they'll face the brunt of extreme weather. And then on a global scale, it's just insane. The migration of people away from areas that are no longer going to be livable, and the suffering that's going to happen there, and the disease and famine that comes with that, and the wars and resource wars, like that is a very scary thing. And it's very easy. I wish I could, I'm going to stay in my lane and work away on my own little thing. But like, you can't ignore this, and like we're actually seeing the results of it happening already. Mitigation as well, as in let's make this as okay as possible. It doesn't really get rewarded because nobody knows what would have happened otherwise. But we have to. It's the only way to do it. And like, I'm a bit worried as well right now that as we're doing some steps, when we water them down, we actually make nobody happy, and we can maybe damage the sentiment, because I think most people. To be fair, when I was in the doors, I had maybe less than 5 super negative reactions of climate change is not real. Being green is a hoax, all of that. Very, very, most people are on board. But how much is, of course, the question, and how much they understand that most people are just living their lives as well, and they want this taken care of. But yeah, I don't think we're at anything if we're not tackling this. And Ireland has been a laggard. I mean, the Greens went into government there, but definitely got some of our climate stuff through, and it's there to stick, because it's everybody's responsibility, not just the Green Party in Ireland. In Europe as well, it was a very green-driven 5 years in politics, but we saw that in the reaction. Like I like to be kind and collaborative in politics, but there's some really bad faith actors, particularly prevalent in Europe, and who's elected to the European Parliament. We've kind of really only started seeing that happening in Ireland now, and I see where this goes. If you look at everything they stand for outside of climate, it's just terrible. It's like really bad. If you could describe the exact opposite to my politics, it is the far right. On like every single policy issue, for me, they're just wrong. And I also see like why are they pushing this? There's money involved. Let's tear down the whole capitalist system and see how they function. We're not going to do that though. I don't think. People I saw in there, they're really bad faith actors. They rile up 20 to 40% of the population in their countries and get elected, and it's all sound bites. So people are busy; they don't have time to properly engage in what are complicated answers to complicated questions. So they go with the easy approach, but we have to fight back against this. I think the Greens have been losing that battle. Not everywhere though. The European Greens went down, I think about 20 seats from 70 odd, but actually most of those losses were in France, Germany, and Ireland. In other places, the awareness is going up and people are getting it. And for me as well, politically, in the climate stuff, you have to get the politicians elected, but you also have to continue to campaign, because the Greens were never more than 10% in the European Parliament. They've the most amount of Greens ever in Irish politics is 7%. Like, everything that's happening for the people who are giving out about it, it's not just us. Like that. When you're sitting down with other politicians, they acknowledge that we need to do these things. But we have to get it done right. And this is also about, when we water things down, sometimes nobody's happy and we lose the goodwill. And I worry about that. We absolutely need to fight back on the crap, because it's not very charitable. It's not very Irish to not face up to the facts. I think as well, I really want to plan better in all aspects of politics, and like, what is the biggest challenge facing humanity? It's climate change. So let's sort it now, so we don't have horrendous crisis in 20-30 years time globally, because we saw the reactions to what is minor things on the global scale, in terms of migration, for example, and you see people's reaction to it and how much hate and fear is whipped up. We really have to plan better to avoid these things, because unfortunately there's always actors who are going to push in certain ways.
And why do you think, Rob, you mentioned France and Germany and Ireland, I think, around having lost seats for their Green parties. Why do you think Ireland is one of those countries relative to some other ones? Ireland has like a history of having like a graw for the land, for nature. A lot of our mythology is tied up in it. Do you think that we've disconnected from that? And do you think if we maybe reconnected to that would help us be have more empathy, I suppose, when it comes to climate change?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, actually. I don't think it's asked often enough. Absolutely. I think we are disconnected, and it's only in certain times that you're given the chance that you realize, oh wow, this place is beautiful. And it's usually on a holiday or during COVID when we all went walking in our localities. But also you do forget these things. It's very sanitized how we get our food. Plastic box and super value, and that's the meat there. Like we forget about that isn't an animal, and that it had to be slaughtered, and where that came from and what it ate. I don't agree with this farmers versus the environment thing, because in the first offence that is said on behalf of farmers, and it's true, is that they're the most well connected to the land. They understand it best, and that is true. Absolutely. And it's something, if you're just a regular consumer and you're not living on a farm or you're not living out the country, that you don't see, or you don't see it in the way they do. How do we give people the space and the time? I mean, I'm going to bring up something Una will like here now. 4-day work week. I think we just need time to have the space to breathe, because everybody's running and racing and is just knackered all the time. Like, it is a rat race, in no matter what sector you're in. Like, and for what are we doing? Like, if I could just dismantle the entire economic system and just make it more people focused, that would be my little. Well, I'd also fix world peace and world hunger and all that. But like, yeah.
It's like Miss Universe here.
yeah, world peace. I do think though, like, people haven't got the time. And that's a common theme in all of this. If we all had the time to read and attend workshops, like I love non-formal education because you'll get in. Okay, if somebody wants to be well read on climate change or healthcare, whatever, they'll study it. But for vast majority of the population, I think everybody should have climate literacy. Everybody should have general media literacy. And you mentioned at the start as well that I got the Leaving Cert cancelled. It was not me. I was a part of the support staff. It was a fantastic group of 18 and 19-year-olds who showed up, all the adults in the room and got that done. And it was very much a lesson in imposter syndrome. There's no such thing, because if they did it, it was quite something that happened then. And I think we've just forgotten about it, that we cancelled the Leaving Cert for 2 years there. The Department of Education don't
Honestly,
want to have that discussion on what's the future of education. But yeah, sorry, in that role, it was with the Irish Second Level Students' Union. We did an awful lot of workshops. I remember going out into schools and you'd get generally with student council, but also not just, but you get your very interested students who'd be engaged in hands up, but it's getting the other people in the group to, okay, maybe they were totally disinterested at the start, and then they might start listening in, and then eventually they'll put their hand up and give an opinion. And like, if we had more time to do this kind of stuff, and also in our communities, if we also just had the time to meet our neighbours, and the whole kind of metal approach to things of let's we really imported some there's a sociological view of all of this, of how we interact with each other. And I think your semi-detached concrete front garden, driving the kids to school, it doesn't really lend itself to a nice society where we're all mixing and appreciating the land and each other. And yeah, I don't I think we totally lost that in terms of how things were, but not in that long of a time.
No,
So
it can
we can
still be
definitely get these
gained
things
back.
and I see the appetite as well, because as you said, COVID, everything changed. People are very social, and I think that's the Irish thing. Yeah, your stereotype of being in the pub and having the crack, because we're not just social, everyone's social. The Italians love to sit out and sit on a terrace and chat all day. It's a certain kind of fun that comes with it, and we all have our own levels of it. But I think that kind of makes us more Irish, and it's also a thing that's very much adopted by anybody. So I have friends who wouldn't have been born in Ireland, but they come here and they're here like 10 years now, and of course they get the accent. It's kind of gas. They'll have a little word a little bit off, and then they'll say the most Irish thing you've ever heard. But like, if they have that energy, I'm like, yeah. And then I see, oh yeah, this is why, you are here. You obviously enjoy the energy that comes from the Irishness of it all.
Yeah, no, exactly. I often think about like how there's some cultural aspects that, or certain kind of activities, I suppose, that we used to do a little bit more, like around storytelling, or around, like you mentioned, mehel there. Or even what came into my mind is like those kind of crossroad dances that we used to have.
Yeah.
And I feel like we always run to the excuse of, oh geez, the weather's crap, sure, look, can't be going out doing that. Can't be going out dancing in the crossroads because it's pelting. I'm like, it was pelting like whatever 100 years ago, and they did it. And I think, as you said, if you spend more time in the nature, and if you have that time, if you have a shorter work week, for example, then you can spend that time, being more aware of your surroundings, being able to give more to it, giving back to your community. And I suppose maybe that's also why people are, really enjoying being out and living out in more rural places, because they're realizing how much giving back to nature and the community and the environment around them gives back to them. It's kind of like a cyclical relationship in a way.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I mean, things are so fast right now, and we kind of can't even come up for the air to think like, okay, what can I like tangibly do with my life in order to help stop/slow down climate change. And as you mentioned there about being like climate literate, what if somebody wanted to become more climate literate, Rob? What are like maybe a couple of things that you would recommend that they do?
I have a really good tangible answer to this, and it's not read the IPCC reports, because nobody has time for that. There is a fantastic resource. I thought I was green. I was sold on the green messaging, and we need to fight climate change. And I did this really amazing workshop. It's called Climate Fresk. It used to be called Climate Collage, but Fresk, Fresk. It's best done in a group. It's best done in person as well. Somebody is a facilitator. I'm a facilitator. And there's loads of people across the country, across the world who do this. And it takes about 2.5 hours. And in a collaborative way, non-formal education, you go through the IPCC reports, and what exactly it means, because
Mm-hmm.
every few years, why do we know climate change is going to be so bad? The whole world has come together in a kind of UN agency and created this intergovernmental panel on climate change, and they do these reports every few years to say how's our progress on this, also in terms of capping emissions and reaching these Paris Agreement targets that all the countries in the world agreed on. And it is all really well explained and understood. And at the end of the day, or at the end of the workshop, you have a 2 meter by 1 meter poster where everything uh, is there, and you understand it. And it is the best tool. Anytime I've done it for people as well, they're like, "Wow, I get it now." It's a little bit scary towards the end, but it's really rewarding. And a lot of companies as well can bring this in. If there is anybody in the company listening, and you want to do something, part of corporate social responsibility, or anything, it's a 3-hour workshop. Some facilitators do this professionally. I'm a volunteer. Most people, I think, just do it voluntarily. We want to make people climate literate, and it really puts it all down on a piece of paper, and it helps you understand it. And I think is the best tool we have available to us right now, to get people more
Brilliant.
climate literate, because
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, some people still like to say that, oh well, the weather's great today, so climate change, and like, no lads, it's let's laugh at that, but it's actually very serious and scary,
Yeah.
and we're gonna see the results of it. Eh, like, how would people experience climate change? Well, they'll see it on the news, and then they'll see it outside their window as their cars being washed away. That's what's going to happen here. Like,
Mm.
and it's a sad thing. And I think our entire global system isn't prepared for it. Not to go back into the destroy the whole, capitalist economic system we have, but like, insurance is a thing that we have, and it's just not going to work. And
Mm. Never thought
if we're
about
really
that,
going
but
into the
yeah.
scary territory of 3 degrees, like, that is in uninhabitable parts of the planet, that the scale of
Mm.
migration and death is going to be horrendous. And yeah, the whole, what are we doing? Working our 5-day 40+ hour weeks, for what?
What's climate fresk, you said? So we spoke about climate change and Ireland's relationship to it, and obviously there's a bit of a struggle there. I think something that has been a struggle for a while, which I think we're kind of getting a little bit more of a handle on, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts, is our own language, Gaelga. And I know you're a Gaelgor, Rob, as am I. And I've observed so much recently, like especially on TikTok. I don't know if it's the same for you, but like my For You page is just full of people going about their daily life, doing it all through Irish, like doing their vlogs through
Long
Gaelga
hail,
and
yeah.
all. It's amazing. I love it. Festus on lay, outfit
Yeah.
of the day. And there's so many creators, artists, making clothes, prints, bags, whatever you have, Oscuelga. It's fantastic to see. How do you feel as a Gaelgor about the Irish language currently, and where do you think it's headed?
Yeah, if we're talking idealism, I would love for every child in the country to be given the option to study through Irish. We have just such a shortage. I think yesterday there was finally a Gael School or Gael Closh announcement for like Dublin South inner city. Like, 'cause there's nothing, I think, between like Dublin 4, 6, and 8. Like, you have to go down to Closhdown and Easagon. So yeah, there's the demand is there. But I would love for there to be an option, and that's maybe a goal in 30 years' time, if we build up to it. We have to add capacity to Gael Scoilna and Gael Flashty in the country, because I will say it's often asked, oh, tá Gaeilge agat, you have Irish, what school did you go to? And that's not meant in the classic Irish way, but it's, oh, did you go to a Gael school? And often people have, and that brings a certain population, and a certain amount of people who are ready and happy to speak Irish, out of the education system, as opposed to maybe a lot of other people's experience of Irish, which is, school maybe ruins it for them, and they have to learn to fall back in love with the language, or learn to forgive what happened to them in the past. Yeah, that's the vision. I think it's amazing what has happened in the last few years. I won't give all the credit to Kneecap, although it's definitely a big part of it. Suddenly Irish was cool, and definitely inspired other people to come out. I also think as well, it's for us, Irish nationalism is an interesting thing, because it's not kind of, and it can't become this scary thing that's happened in other countries. But no, it is about reclaiming what is ours, and that we've maybe let go. And Irish is fucking class. The amount of opportunities and mad things that are having to be. I only really started getting into Irish the first year in college, and I wasn't studying Irish. I was doing an engineering degree. And I got the comments to go out. You have your leaving cert Irish level, and you go out and just meet this bunch of people from all walks of life, all types of courses. And the one thing that unites us is this Irishness. And I think everybody should have that experience, and it's never too late as well to go into it. I actually had a really interesting conversation with a lad. He is from, I want to say, he's from Argentina, and he's been living in Ireland for 4 years, and now he's fluent. Like, there's something very special happening when these characters are coming over and learning, and they see such beauty in a language, which maybe for a lot of us we didn't always do so. And we have so much written down. I don't think you really give Leaving Cert poetry the time it deserves, and how beautiful it is. And to be honest, that's something I still struggle with, but I'd love to be better at it, and reading books as Gaeilge. But it's a part of our Irish identity. I will say it's not, right now it's not the uniting thing. The way I said earlier about, socialness and a bit of development, but it can be. And I think we're on a very good path right now. And that's credit to organisations like Conor na Gaeilge, who are doing all this stuff behind the scenes and maybe not getting as much credit as the pop stars of the day and the TikTokers. And credit as well to the TikTokers who are putting up the Festa on Lay, and they do it for 3 months and it's getting 200 views, and then the content is going there, and it's an act of Irish language activism to get it up there. And then now I'm seeing the followings are there, and you actually have Irish language influencers and stuff. Gas. I never would have thought that would have happened 5-6 years ago.
No, it's happened so fast, and it's absolutely amazing. I think it's kind of a little bit infectious in a way, because you go onto these TikToks, you go into the comment section, and you just see everyone like, oh my God, I really want to learn Irish. This is so great that you're providing the subtitles in both English and Irish. It really helps me. Or what's even more encouraging again is when you see the people who are putting their videos up through Irish, they're not fluent. They're like, I saw this one girl and she was like, I did ordinary level Irish. I'm just going to try and put a few pieces up. And I couldn't believe she did ordinary level. She was flying it but it was amazing to see. And I'm kind of thinking now, I'm like, oh God, I want to put up some content as Gaeilge, just because let's just add to this momentum, this movement. And I'm like, God, are we having a second Gaelic revival here? When the Abbey Theatre and the GAA and all of that, I feel to a certain extent we are it is. I feel in the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s, it wasn't cool. It's so bloody cool now. It really is. So yeah, it's a very exciting time to want to speak Irish. And hats off to your Argentinian friend for having a go at it. Like, it's funny because I'm learning Spanish, so oftentimes in my head, sometimes I'll come out with an Irish word instead of a Spanish word, because you're using the same part of your brain for your second languages. And I actually noticed then that there's actually a few words that are like similar, like they kind of similar roots. I suppose that's, Latin or whatever for the Indo-European languages. But I don't know, I get a thrill out of it. Like, it's like, oh my god, de Lewin and then lunes, like, and obviously you just have Monday in English, which is, obviously another route. But I love saying that two languages you don't know that well, but you can see the comparisons. It's very exciting, I suppose, and it makes you feel more connected to Irish. And you're going, yeah, this can be on a global stage. Of course it can. Like, this is so exciting.
You mentioned about people maybe not having the confidence as well. Like, I had such like patchy Irish. A few pints does help, but not to force people to drink, but it definitely does. But it also is a thing. If you're worried about your mistakes, like, people actually, they shouldn't correct you, because the whole point of it is understanding, as we know, and like, you actually end up kind of correcting yourself, and it's a very normal, like, language experience. And like, if there's ever going to be a forgiving language group, and it's very, actually, Spanish people are very nice as well, no matter how bad your Spanish can be, because I worked in a bar in Spain, and like, Jesus, it was pretty bad at the start. But yeah, France as well is a place where notoriously it's very difficult to integrate, and they'll respond to you in English if they have it. But no, your Irish group, they all know exactly the education system and what we all went through, and some of them have been in your situation just a few years earlier if they're not native speakers. So yeah, just give it a go. They're going to be great.
100%. That's it. I love it. I think it's like probably the best part of Irish people comes out that true charitability that we spoke about earlier on. I want to wrap up, Rob, with one last question that I ask everyone. I'm supposed to go back to the overall theme and topic of the podcast. So we've touched on loads of things in relation to Irish culture here, but what does it mean to you to be Irish?
Yeah, I kind of half answered this earlier. I would say, I'm going to go a bit abstract here. My favourite word, oscoilge, is fuinev, which means energy. And I don't mean like your electricity. I think there's a little... okay, we're all social creatures. I touched on this earlier, and there is a little bit of kind of divilment or fun with Irish people that we're known for. And, when another group of people is noticing it, like, it's probably true, that, maybe we don't always notice ourselves. But there's... I find, if you're in a bar in Bali, or you're on, because you'll always bloody bump into Irish people as well. And this divilment and this energy as well also, like, we go traveling. The bug is there. And yeah, it's probably, a psyche thing as well, given that people had to immigrate all the time. But yeah, this fun of... It's not just energy in an energetic sense that, I'm ready and willing for the day. No, Jesus, it's bloody depressing in the winter here as well. We're not always full of energy, but there is a certain... Probably need a word for it. There might be a word for it. Mr. Mahon Magan tends to have these things wrapped up. But yeah, fun of energy, a certain bowelness, divilment energy that... makes us fun, but also wanderlusty, and I think, brings you
curious
back. Yeah, curious, and gives you a bit of perspective of the world as well, and we can't lose that.
I love that. I say there is a word to summarize that. I loved as well what you said there. You didn't say devilment, you said divilment, and you said boldness as opposed to boldness. I think the pronunciation of those words in itself summarizes perhaps what you're trying to get across. It's kind of like a sense of cheekiness or something. I love that though. And I think when you encounter Irish people outside of Ireland, that's when that spark of that fun of that energy comes alive. It's like, oh, do you know this person? Where are you from? You lived here, all that road.
Yeah.
It all comes
Yeah,
out then.
and we're also used to it happening, but like it's actually a thing no other country does. Like, and it's because we're small, and you know it's a thing we're used to, but like it's actually kind of weird. Like the other countries are like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
And there's no way you'll know each other, but actually we do.
I know, even though there's 5 million,
Yeah.
you still somehow find some kind of connection. It's absolutely
So you won't get
amazing.
away with anything as well. So
No, be careful.
be nice.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Rob, for joining. I really appreciate it. We had a great conversation here today, and best of luck with your next chapter, whatever you go for next. Thank you so much, Gurv
It'll
Mila.
be revealed soon. So thanks.